Good evening and welcome, everybody. It is the 8th of May 2024. Okay, so what is the purpose of tonight? I thought it would be quite instructive because SSA is going through a tough time at the moment with the whole EU SSA situation. So I thought it would be instructive since Limitless were knocked out in the quarterfinals, losing to two EU teams, one of those teams here in South Africa, or at least 2/3 of them, and the other based in EU. It might be worth breaking down the Limitless Mobula game to look at where is there room for improvement, what came out of an analysis of that, and maybe that would be instructive. It's great content. Secondly, it might be useful for other SSA teams. So for that, I'm bringing in two people to assist, and they are the Bromeo and LDC. The Bromeo is fast becoming the man with the stats, all the stats, the deep dive into stats in SSA, and LDC has long experience as a Rocket League coach, currently coaching the Nixa team. So
if y'all don't follow Graybeard, you need to get in there.
Well, there you go. Thank you for the follow. Cannoli, I think it was. Thanks for following. Welcome to the party. And LDC, I guess we'll get started with you, because I hope your notes are good, because your team going up against the mentioned team Mobula on Friday night.
Yeah, it's a matchup that's obviously going to be quite tough, going up against the reigning champs right now. But yeah, I hope my analysis is on par and is good, because I think this is also going to be able to apply to a lot of the other SSA teams as well. And so we're going to try to look into a little bit of the details from what I think that's defined that matchup with Limitless and Mobula in the Swiss stage, as well as the Drift Queen series later on as well, which is sort of comparable but has a little bit of a different sort of detail to it.
Okay, well, I think the way we're going to go is, I think LDC, you'll get things running for us, and then Bromeo, I know you've got pages and pages of stats and heat maps and all sorts of things, and you'll come in with that info as we go, right?
Yeah, we'll get it firing all along. Look, I've got stats all day of the weeks, but most of them are boring as hell, and we want to keep your audience captivated and not put them to sleep. So hopefully, I'll only show you the useful ones.
Well, don't underestimate the nerd level of Rocket League viewers. So yeah, so I think there might well be deep interest. All right, well, LDC, let's get kicked off. Go for it.
Right, so like we said, we're just going to look into a little bit of the details and maybe a little bit of a context surrounding the Limitless versus Mobula matchup. And I think as well that it's interesting to, look at the past a little bit as well, because obviously EU teams in SSA haven't been a thing for long. But we all know before that Limitless was, hands down the best team in the region, and they haven't really been contested up until the point that EU teams obviously got introduced into the region. And so my question and where I'd like to start this off is actually more on the the psychological side. Okay. If you're on a team that's been so dominant for so long and hasn't really had a lot of trouble winning quite a lot of regionals, how would the introduction of EU teams weigh up against that mental position of knowing that you're the best, to all of a sudden having this huge influx of new teams and players that can easily contest you, as we saw for for championships?
I mean, like, here's a point I wanted to raise up, and it's the same reason why my prediction on desk was Limitless to take it, because Snowy has made every single championship Sunday that has ever existed. Like, the man doesn't know how to lose, and last Saturday we saw them lose, and that's what made it so bitter, is that we're so accustomed to seeing our superhero Limitless side winning week in, week out, that when they lose, we don't know what to do. And I think that's just important context, is that Limitless have been doing so well for so long that there hasn't been any context in losing. It's not a, oh, they've lost. Well, they do that every now and then. They never lost. And that's why, this is why we're possibly sitting here today talking about them, because what learnings can we take from all of this? Because it's so important that we do, ultimately.
Yes, and like you said, I think it's not only Limitless that can learn from their mistakes and losing against Mobula and Drift Screens. It's the whole of SSA. I think there's so many things that you can take away from a series like that, especially because it's gonna be the top level of SSA for quite a little bit of time. These teams, so especially for the developing players, developing teams, it's very important that you look at these games, that you look at what certain players do and what their what their tendencies are and how they like to handle certain situations. And the thing that I like to point out is that what is very interesting now for SSA teams is to look at what sort of play style and what sort of decision making habits that EU teams import now into SSA. And I think having that as a major advantage, obviously for EU teams, is because they have been playing, on their servers twos. Players are getting 2.3, 2.4, 2.5k MMR in twos, and they do that by not only utilizing their mechanics, because mechanics are important, however you may see it, but they are important. But it's more that decision making and more sort of like being put in so many different scenarios, how you're able to form your thought process on what you should do in what scenario. And this is what I would like to bring up, is that what sort of decision making and what sort of habits are typical for these EU teams moving over to SSA, and what have they brought over, and what can you learn from them being an SSA player, an SSA team, let's say. So the first thing is that there's sort of a standard sort of play style in 3v3 what these teams are bringing in. And it's actually quite simple. When you have the ball, you slow it down. You take control. You try to play for the possession. You try to set up a play, and you try to be as efficient as possible doing that. And by efficiency, I mean is that if you have control as a player, your goal is to outplay the first player challenging you from the opponents. That's quite simple. The next thing you want to do, and the most important part actually, is after you outplay that player, you want to try to get back in control over the ball. And that's how you do the outplays. And if you're the best player in the world, let's say for instance even Zen, even when playing against the top EU teams or the best teams in the world at a major, he is able to take control over the ball, outplay a player, and get into perfect control over the ball right in the nick of time. And this is something that is very, very important as well for SSA players to understand, is that when you have the ball, efficiency is key. If you think that, I don't have any info, I'm just gonna bang this ball forward and because I think it's safe, then that's not really gonna get you anywhere. So the thing is that when you're in possession, control is everything. Efficiency is everything, and that comes from being able to catch the ball and dribble the ball. It comes from being able to have a really a touch on an aerial. Like when you go for the aerial, it allows you, or it's important to have like a touch that's very very that's full of quality and that allows you to get back into control again. And when you're not in possession, you fly at it. You just put so much pressure on the enemy team, and you just switch up the pace. That's basically typical for, as well as Mobula, as well as Drift Queens, is that if they have the ball, they slow it down, they play control. If they don't have the ball, they put so much pressure on. And Limitless is not used to that. Limitless is not used to having teams respect them so much. And by respect, I mean believing that Limitless players can just, get a double flip reset, whatever they can do. And when you respect them, you just fly at them because you don't want that to happen at all. And I think what has been going on is that Limitless throughout, or before the EU team era, had so much time always to do what they want because people were afraid of them. You were afraid when playing Limitless, so that goes into your mind. And the way you play against Limitless, if you think, oh, I'm playing Limitless, I'm playing literally the best team in the region. If you go into it with a mindset like that, you're gonna play much more scared, and that's only gonna bite you in the end. And that's literally the opposite of what these teams are doing. They are respecting the hell out of the Limitless players. They are pre-jumping them. They are putting the pressure on so much that Limitless just don't have the time to do anything.
I think that's actually a very, very valid point you just raised there, is the fact that Limitless has been given so much respect for so long that teams train to beat Limitless. And now, with all of these new teams joining up, coming through with a different style of play, and I think for me, that has been the one big silver lining, is that in these last couple of weeks, I have seen more variety in play style than I've ever seen. And with the South African aggressive way, demo heavy, force the 50, and then play from there. I thought that was how you played Rocket League, mainly because this is what you're exposed to at a local level. And, what you're saying is, be quick to contest, but once you have possession, control it, respect it. And what I've seen from this Team Mobula side, from a couple of the other EU sides, Drift Queens, Astronic, is that their passing plays off first touch have been amazing. And we don't. I feel like our passing plays are generally the result of a favorable 50-50. When we've hit the opponent as hard as we can, we got a nice bounce. And then we play off that, we play off the mistake, we play off the gap in rotation, and then we score. But what I've noticed from these EU sides is that they're so fast to the ball that they score before you've gotten there. It's not a score off a mistake. It's a score from simply being faster and more mechanical. And I think we spoke at length last major about ping disadvantage. I feel like this last weekend we saw the first evolution of a South African team plays against a EU team to counter ping, right?
Mhm.
And now the EU side knows exactly what the South African side is going to do to counter, to play the ping advantage. And then they one up on that. They get to the ball first so that there is no 50.
I
And
have a question there, Bromeo, and LD, you can come in as well, because it felt like that initially, certainly in that the first split, the local teams did have an advantage because of that, the understanding of ping, because SSA players have played EU for so long. So being on the reverse of that, there was more of an understanding. Has there been, is that now, that advantage now over with Drift Queens and others having gotten used to playing on the high ping? LD,
Yeah, sure. I think that there's probably going to be a truth behind, EU players, teams now getting used to the ping. And I think that they will probably change around their, their decision making and play style a little bit to compensate for that. But I don't think it's impacting their, how the way they play the game quite a lot. I still think they're doing whatever they do over at EU servers. They just try to, I think, either avoid 50-50s when it's possible, or if it's not, I don't think they will go, immensely out of their way to avoid them. But I think they'll just try to be faster, like you say, to just, get past the 50-50 and just go for the clean beat in general. I think that's probably, the way that they like to do it on their own service as well. Especially in 2v2s, players don't really go for a lot of 50-50s, only in like scenarios where that's basically the best thing they can do. Just because 50-50s can be super random. So basically you want to get the randomness out of the game and go for the clean beats instead. And I think that's definitely, a part of why these EU teams are playing so aggressively, especially when they don't have the ball.
All right, and just a note, I'm keeping track of chat and making notes on questions that will get answered. So so toward the end, I'll backtrack on a bunch of the chat. So you're not being completely ignored. Ignored. Sorry, and Bromeo, to you.
Well, I just, want to, cover this in, as broadly as possible so we can focus down as accurately as possible. I mean, the point of this whole discussion we're having right now is yes, ping has been an issue, but now it's becoming still an issue, but it's more negligible because they are, the EU imports are also figuring out strategies to play against us. Initially it was so myopic, so narrow-minded of us to assume that if you play to the ping advantage, that's all we need to do. But now that these different strategies are coming in, and we saw an absolute masterclass of it over the weekend with regards to Limitless versus Mobula, and even to a certain extent Drift Queen's Limitless, because they employed very, very similar playstyles for very, very similar results. And the let's just dive into this quickly, and I'll just cover my heat maps quickly, just so we can talk about this. But I just want to mention one thing, and that is field control. Right? We're used to die for being lightning all around the field, and he was. He played a very, very good game. But the constriction that they played, and I'm going to show you a couple of heat maps quickly, and these are just game 1 through 4, right? And so what you're looking at here is the white background. Sorry, it's on light mode. My apologies. But the white background is where no player was, and the greener it gets, the more a player was in that position on the field. And so what's important to note here, and let me zoom in here, is that first game's pretty negligible. You can see that they were all over the place. They were feeling each other out. That's why we always say that there's a certain element of randomness to game 1, because they're just trying to establish themselves. But what I want you to take note of is where To Die For was on the field, notably on the backboard and all around here, and VK Salen, who I've pinned up against them as being the most forward man in general, the striker, if you will. So VK played predominantly off mid boost, and also, coincidentally, the exact same position of where To Die For was on the backboard. Right, so now we're going to move over to game 2, and then you'll see the difference. Now, VK Salen was owning mid boost. And if you look at the counterparts, nobody was on mid boost from Limitless except for To Die For, where there was a very, very big tussle for it. And you can see that the game plan starting to take shape here. And I mean, this is also very important to note. Rubix is about as third man can get. He is, and I say this with the most respect, I mean, he's heading up, I think he is currently second overall in most assists for the whole of qualifier 4. But he spends 52% every game on average at slow speed, which means he's not flipping, he's not boosting, he's just driving, which means he is incredibly efficient in the way that he uses his space. And so you can see him marching up and down that the halfway line and straight up and down that vertical. And what this means is, as we go along, you can see this is the game where I think they sort of clawed one back Limitless, but it was pretty much all downhill from here. You can see To Die For was camped up in his half most of the time. And then you have a look at VK again, owning the mid boost. And myself, I think we're done there for now, Greybeard. I think myself and LDC, we were talking about what does this mean? Because we use boost starved quite a lot. And I was having a look at boost consumption, and they consumed relatively similar amounts of boost throughout the course of the game, throughout all of it. It was negligible, which means that they weren't being boost starved, but they were being deprived of a front foot start, which means To Die For was forced to attack from his backboard instead of collecting the mid boost and launching from there. And I think this is so important to note, because VK is one of the fastest players in the league, that every time he got that mid boost, it means that he could burn 100% of it just to get to the ball first. And you don't see that a lot, because South Africa's got this conservative mindset of conserve boost, conserve the rotation. VK was up front claiming the boost first so he could claim the ball first.
Yep. And I think this is also a good time to bring up the first clip here, because it's also a thing where obviously where the ball is, you can push up, and it wasn't possible to to be as dominant in the midfield and take all these midfield boosts if you don't have the ball in the opponent's half. So this, for instance, this is a clip for in game 3, as you can see, it's literally the beginning of the game, where in the beginning you see just VK Salins is just chasing the ball. He's just stopping Limitless from moving out of their pitch. They're stalking the ball. This is a good chow, 50-50. They basically just don't give Limitless any chance at all to get in control and move the ball, a lot closer to the goal than they would want. And you can see that Limitless is getting the ball into their half, but they literally do not have a single ounce of control. And then it only just takes one moment, like one mistake, one little gap in time where the Mobula players can take control over the ball, start air dribbling, go for a bump, and bang, it's a goal. They are just so efficient with their boost and so efficient with their opportunities that keeping the opponent in their own half oftentimes is just plenty enough to score a goal. And if you can have sort of a monopoly over these mid boosts, then you basically don't give the opponent any big chance to to gain control, to build up a good amount of boost to set up a play, because the boost is just not there. They stop the ball in the midfield so many times. They are so aggressive, and that's typical Spanish teams. Like, it used to be a meme back in back a couple of years ago in Europe, that Spanish players were like only ball chasing, this and that. And you see a little bit of that back here, but there's obviously a strategy to it. They are so aggressive when Limitless have the ball. They don't allow for anything, and that's something that Limitless is just not used to.
I mean, I think to add on to that point, I saw an insane stat, right? In game 2, the game where Limitless they won game 1, but they lost game 2 by some margin. I think it was 4-0 or 3-0 or 3-1, something like that. It was very one-sided. Here's the stat. To Die For spent 82.86% of the entire game in his own half. Like, it means that, and it was very similar for Snowy as well, 78%, Sweaty 85%. Like, they were camped. They were camped in their own half, not through their own volition, but purely because Team Mobula and VK were just so aggressive with challenging the ball first and also securing the midfield. They dominated those mid boosts. And I don't think I've ever seen a game where, forget the corner boosts, because there wasn't a boost deficiency. There wasn't, these people are using less boost than the opponents. It was very similar. So Limitless was still getting their boost. However, Team Mobula was getting their boost faster, and they were getting to the ball faster, and it was a siege. Mobula absolutely sieged Limitless's side of the field, and it's been a while since I've seen something like that.
So we well, I just had a question there. We're talking about speed being quicker, and LD, you were talking about aggression, and I don't know if demos played a role. And Bromeo, I know you're a big one on the demo stats. How much of a role did the demos play in terms of the play style you guys are outlining here?
Well, you can show the stat that you showed me earlier as well. Like, we saw that VK Salen had, like, what was it, 2.4 average demos per game or something like that.
Yeah.
And
so have a look here quickly.
it's also it's the same thing. Like, if you can just trap the other team in their own half, like, you create so much more opportunities to make off rotation plays, like a demo, like a boost grab, something like that. It's just easy to do because you're so close anyway. And it's also interesting to note that because they are so aggressive, that doesn't necessarily mean that their average speed is also quite high, because that's actually not the case. As far as average speeds go, I think we noticed that that Limitless was actually, on average, they were actually faster.
Yeah,
Um,
it was a very similar stat, but just
yeah.
for viewers, what you're looking at right now is the combined stats for the whole of the fourth qualifier. So the weekend that we've just seen prior to the open quals for 5. So
Mhm.
VK Salen is in clear lead for most demos, and Sweaty, who's usually an absolute demon, um, a little bit more reserved in 8th position. And I think, we're talking about speed and aggression, and we're talking about demos. And Limitless loves to demo, especially on the front foot, because that's what creates the goal scoring opportunities.
Mhm.
And in one of those games, we saw a silly amount of demos. I mean, we just have a look at the demo stats here. We can see the total demos overall, and VK had nine demos in total. Snowy came in with 5, Leora came in 5, Sweaty with a more reserved 4. But you can see that it's pretty similar, except for Salen getting, pretty aggressive out there. And I
Mhm.
think if you're having a look at team stats overall, I think you're going to notice that it's a difference, but it's not a huge difference. So
Mhm.
Team Mobula demoed one more time per game than Limitless did. So you can say it's a negligible stat because there's no material difference. It's one demo. But
Mhm.
the thing is, demos need to be used cleverly. And what I noticed about the demos that Team Mobula were doing is they often demoed the second man or the third man coming around to relieve, and it was very tactical. It wasn't a goal line demo to open the goal. It was a demo at the halfway line to make sure that when it was time for a goal, there was no defender there anyway. So it was a lot less dramatic. It looked like a runaway goal, but it was in fact that the work had already been done a couple seconds earlier. We just, as the viewer, didn't notice it yet until the ball rolled in and there was no defender.
Yeah, and so adding on to that, like it's also maybe it's also a good time again to put up or pull up the clip number 2. Is that these demos, the average speed being sort of the same, is basically because Mobula plays so close to the ball. Every single time that there's a player on the ball, there's a second man that's just so close. And like this Chell right here from I think it's from VK Salen. If you can maybe go back a little bit before he does it. Um, but this ball here, like they defend it towards the sidewall, and you could say, okay, probably Ace and Rubik's is gonna drive up to it, or like he's gonna go for the aerial. No, VK Salen just jumps from the midfield and touches it, just to make sure that there's no possibility for Limitless to slow down the play. And they get caught off guard, and this way, VK Salen is just so interruptive. He goes for chows like that. He goes for a bump. He goes for the boost grab. He's just mainly the one that's the annoying one, you would say, basically. Like if you would play against these people, he would be the most annoying player to play against. Um, but that's just what they do. Like they by being so aggressive, they create so much time to go for these sort of plays, and that's how that's what shook the pillars of Limitless. I think is that Limitless is used to playing a very basic, and not to say that's bad. Obviously, that's good, but they don't take enough risk. They don't play. They don't invest a lot of time into like a specific sort of strategy. At least against a team like this, where that's absolutely needed, because they're used to winning against teams that are not the same level as them. Because that's only what was required. And now when they're met with teams that are the same level or maybe even better than them, that becomes a lot more challenging. So a strategy like this where you could, for instance, have Sweaty, which you said was the demo demon. If you can get him to make more of these plays, and enable him to do so by being more aggressive yourself, and play actually sort of the same play style that Mobula does, you'll become much more competitive. But right now, I think the way that Limitless is playing is just a little bit too basic for that to happen.
All right. So, what else have you got there in terms of stats. I don't know, Bromeo, if we've covered the main ones to kind of
Well,
illustrate the
I
points.
I I can corroborate a lot what LD has just said. Um, on average, the um, the Team Mobula side plays a lot closer to the ball and a lot closer to each other.
Mhm.
On average, they are all higher, well, closer to the ball than Limitless. Like there's no comparison. You've got in average distance to teammates, you've got the three Limitless players coming out with the most distance, and Mobula coming in afterwards. So it means that not one single player was playing closer to a teammate than anybody in the Mobula side. So that's it especially gives credence to the fact that they were just more adaptive, possibly because it's a ping issue as well. You want to stay closer to your teammate because you need to be able to react faster.
Mhm.
And that is very important because they can keep their foot on the pressure. And linking up with the fact that they've got mid boost in their back pocket, they've got a tank full of boost. They spent, where's the stat? They spent an average of 2 minutes at 100 boost per game.
Mm.
So that is 40% of the whole game. They're sitting at 100 boost on average, the whole team. And Limitless, just for comparison, was at 1 minute and 40 seconds. And to put that all into perspective, the lowest in the whole split, I think, was Reverse Oreo at 1 minute 20 seconds.
Okay.
So when you have a look at that, um, it's you see that overall they just much better at managing the boost that they have and securing good boost. They're
Mm.
securing mid boost so that they can burn it and pick up some more along the way because that's where the action is. You don't want to have to rotate all the way back to the corner and guard your back net and then prepare for another attack. VK Salen's grabbed mid boost and he's back on the ball.
Mm.
So that's where it's really really valuable information is that mid boost is vital. It needs to be protected. It needs to be fought for.
Mm.
You know, forget about your back boost. It doesn't matter if you're always there. You know, if your mid boost is not protected and you lose it to the opponent, this is what happens.
So yeah, he who controls the boost controls the universe, as Jezza says in chat, and that's and that's fair. So besides what we've covered, what are the other key points coming out of this? Because I then want to bring it back to SSA teams and how they should be thinking and preparing for playing this a different style of Rocket League for a different style of opponent. LD.
Well, I think that a lot of coaches like to go for the approach of being very strict on like the rotation style, and we've seen obviously with Mobula that there's opportunity to just completely throw that out of the window sometimes. And I think in that sense, for Mobula, obviously they've known each other for quite a long time. They've played like Rubik's and VK Selen have competed with each other in the past as well. I'm not sure about Leoro, but I know these two have. And if you've been playing together for quite a while, you develop a sort of an understanding of how the other player plays. And so if VK Salen decides to go for like a cut, like a very, very aggressive cut or something in rotation, they just trust each other. They trust VK Salen to do whatever he does best. They trust VK Salen to get the demo, to get the beat of the the unexpecting player. Like they are so well meshed, and they trust each other. They know what each other is good at. They know what everyone's good at, and they sort of still apply like basic very good strategy for as far as Rocket League goes, but they give their own touch to it. They give their own feeling to it, and I think that's also important. Is that no single team will play the same way. Every single team will have their strengths, and every single team will have their weaknesses, and it's just so important that you can map these, that you can understand them, and that you can act on them. And obviously you want to train on your weaknesses, and you want to try and look for ways to exploit the things that you're actually good at. So I think as far as like an example, I'd say the guys on 9 Lives, for instance, they are mechanically gifted. It's a given. They are very, very good. And that's something they can use. But obviously, they need to try and, implement it in a sort of way in their gameplay where they can combine their standard strategy, whatever sort of strategy they go for, and however aggressive they want to be, and mix it in with their with their mechanics, for instance.
I know you've got there's a third clip in there, and I don't know when and if now's a good time to bring that one up.
Yeah, so for instance, if we compare it like the Mobula series, what I, in general and very short, Mobula is very aggressive. They have Spanish players. Spanish players have been known for being very aggressive, especially when they don't have the ball. And a team like Drift Queens, they play a little less aggressive. They also apply the pressure when it's needed, and when the other team has the ball, they do that. But Mobula just takes it a little step further. But what you see with Drift Queens is that they go for an approach that's more centered around their mechanics. For instance, something that 9Lives might do as well is that they wait a little bit longer. They just wait for that little small window, like Crypto does here, to chow, to take the ball, take control, and just outplay the whole team. And that's something that is very important as well, because you could say like, wow, this is an amazing goal from Crypto, but this is just a bad decision in defense. You don't want to start air dribbling, especially not with a touch like that. You don't give yourself the opportunity to go for a 50-50 in this way. And Crypto recognizes that. He's been in scenarios like this for like 1,000 times in his 2v2 games, in his 1v1 games even maybe. And he knows how to make use of that and punish you for it. And I think that's something that Limitless hasn't been confronted with. They haven't been confronted with a team that can punish very, very small mistakes like that so efficiently.
All right.
I think.
Sorry, go ahead,
Just to finish that one off, I think, obviously the whole point of this evening, isn't to roast anybody in particular. It isn't to roast any team in particular. And unfortunately, we're talking about Limitless because they're the most obvious example of which to work with, because every team so far has prepared to beat Limitless. Limitless has been the goal. This is, every single team sitting second to 12th is thinking, if we come across them, how do we beat them? And 2 EU teams came across in the span of 24 hours and beat them twice. And both used very similar tactics. I think Crypto's goal, as impressive as it was an absolute ripper from the corner. It's like watching a corner go into the goal. And what I think is important to note there is that to die for, that's one of his traditional setup points. He sets up from the backboard and plays it forward because he's got a tank full of boost and he can do his cool stuff. And like LDC said earlier, is that he is not challenged early enough and often enough, and is often given the space to do what he wants with the ball, to create those opportunities. And what we haven't seen in SSA really is the hottest of challengers in the corner off the sidewall at that height. Is that it's practically unheard of. You wouldn't see it in a replay of any of the SSA teams because they'll generally wait because he's already got the advantage. He'll get to the ceiling and that's where you challenge. You challenge somewhere safe. But that was so opportunistic, but it was also calculated. And these are the lessons we need to be looking at, because if you look, they are there. And these EU teams gave us a textbook explanation of how to beat Limitless on one of their off days. And the whole point of all of this is look and you'll find. You will see what you need to do. And both teams did it over the weekend. So as bad as it is for SSA, we must take our learnings from this. We must see the opportunity it is. We've seen better teams come in, exploit the vulnerabilities. So I think everybody watching this needs to take the main message of this is that learn so that you don't have to be in the same situation.
All right. Well, I think you've segued nicely into the point I'd like to look at now. Is LD, you've mentioned already that, and it's true, every team's got their strengths, their weaknesses, and you can't take one game and apply that across the board. But what we're trying to accomplish with the region in general is is there are broad points that all
Mhm.
the SSA teams can be looking at. And then once you improve those broad things, then there's obviously individual improvements per game and so on. But what are the high level broad strokes for SSA teams facing this new challenge? And LD will start with you.
Well, yeah, well, if I would have to name one, at least the one that we can take away from like these sort of scenarios, is that, like I said in the beginning, efficiency is so important. If you can't get a quality touch, if you can't at least force a 50-50 out of an air dribble that you set up, instead of just, making a touch that just creates a window for them to take the ball away from you, like, it's gonna be details. It's not gonna be the way you rotate. It's not gonna be, you need to rotate to opposite and go back post and this and that. No, it's gonna be in the small details where you're gonna make the difference. And especially once you're climbing the ladders, and the teams are becoming way more competitive and way higher level, it's gonna be the details that are going to make the difference. That's how EU teams are just consistently at the top of the world, because they micromanage so hard, and they know every single little touch they make that has a purpose and has a different goal, and has a benefit for them.
Mm.
And I think as well is that if SSA teams want to level up, especially right now, going on to even the final regional or even into next year, you're gonna have to pay attention to the details, and you're gonna have to put in the work, because if you want to be the best in your region, you have to put a lot of time into it. And you know being as it is, like playing twos and ranked and stuff, obviously that's a little bit more difficult for an SSA region, because they have to deal with the high ping in EU, of course. But try to look for other ways. You can watch the broadcasts, you can watch the better teams play, you can watch EU broadcasts and A broadcasts, whatever. I prefer EU, obviously, but um EU has had his NA's number for quite a while now, but that's a side note. But just try to learn from what you can see. Try to find different sources. Try to talk to coaches, and look for different perspectives. Because in what I think is also a problem currently in this region, is that people scrim,
Mm.
and that's it. They don't, they scrim because they practice, and they think scrimming itself is enough.
Yes.
No, if you don't have a coach, watch your own gameplay. Try to look for your own mistakes. Try to be critical of yourself, and make sure that every hour that you put in counts. Because not only do you need to level up your mechanics by playing, free play, playing ones, playing twos, you also need to become a smarter player. You also need to professionalize yourself, and that's also something that is very important. You can put a lot of hours in the game, but if they're not productive, then you're gonna stick at the level. That's it.
It's an interesting thing. As you were talking there, LD, I was thinking about Formula One, and I know nothing about Formula One. I'm not a fan, but I do know there's a huge amount of money in there, and every year teams are spending millions upon millions upon millions of euros trying to figure out how to be 3/100ths of a second faster around a track. I mean, those are the margins once you get to that level. And
Mhm.
and I think it's a point well made in terms of the attention to those details, Bromeo. And I don't know what you have to offer in terms of what statistically what it tells you and where those fine margins are.
Well, this is what I came from, is when I was doing some research on this. I watched the game first and foremost, and watching a game will often tell you a very different story to what you see in the stats, because when you watch a game, you're looking out for certain things that you can relate to. But when you're looking at stats, you're looking at the things the way that they are. And that's why whenever I want somebody to look at stats, I'll say, if you ever want the truth, look at the numbers.
Mm.
Because when we were discussing this game against Limitless Mobula, we saw the heat map that VK was thriving in mid boost. So obviously that means Limitless is boost starved. No, it doesn't. It just means that they know their rotations. They can pick up the small pads, and there was no statistical difference. It was an irrelevant stat. They both consumed the same amount of boost. They both traveled at roughly the same speed. But if all of these statistics are the same, where is it different? And that's when you start looking at the smaller things. And that's when you start noticing, but hey, they had the same amount of boost, so why are the results so different? It's purely because they were faster to the ball, they were faster to the boost, they were faster to the goal.
Mm.
And it's not because they were faster as in kilometers per hour, they were just closer to the ball so that they could react faster. You don't have to burn through more boost to achieve the same thing if you're already positioned well. And that's my takeaway from this, is that I actually had to study for quite a bit to figure out what the hell went on in that game, because I had to get over my butt hurtness first, because I lost a lot of channel points to that game. And second of all, I had to relearn what it was I was looking at, because it's very easy to say, oh, they just took their chances better, they scored more goals, you know. Yes, sometimes it is like that, but when it happens 4 games in a row, then it's not an anomaly. Something is happening. So do your homework. You know, as a player, it's your obligation to understand the stats. You need to know what the difference was, even if it was a small difference. You need to be able to point it out. So if we want to get better as a region, we need to become better students of Rocket League. And we need to understand what it is that the other team did that was so much better than us. And having these EU teams here could not be better for the current crop of players, so that they can learn that alternate styles exist, and it puts you in situations that make you uncomfortable, so that eventually, through trial and error, that'll be your new normal, and the wins will start coming because you've put in the effort, you put in the work, you've done the homework.
All right. Well, Bromeo, I'm going to take that as your closing message. Become students, better students of Rocket League. And then LDC, your closing message, or your closing thought on this, and what you've taken out of this, and where SSA teams go to from here.
Well, I actually wanted to go into what Bromeo said earlier as well, as like the numbers. The truth is in the numbers. We looked at a couple of stats between, Mobula and Limitless, and the only real difference that we were able to find was the distance between themselves, distance to the ball. And it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. If Mobula plays so close to the ball, that means they don't have to rotate out as much. They don't have to waste a lot of boost to rotate quite far back, because they are able to stop the ball much quicker. They challenge much faster. They're more aggressive on the ball. Their rotation is faster, which means they don't have to rotate a big distance. So if you look at the stats and you have a big difference like that, as far as like a certain stat that really emphasizes the difference between these teams and how they play, then you can learn of that. You can learn by these numbers. And if you're not able to figure it out by yourself, or you don't really understand what went wrong or how you lost the series, look at the stats, look at replays. Ask someone who's arguably better than you to look at your replay and talk about it. Because if you're not gonna invest the time to figure out what went wrong or how you can improve, then you're shooting yourself in the leg. It's literally what a lot of these pro players started doing, is that they started listening to people that were better than them. And if they can't find someone that's better than them in their own region or in their own vicinity, they just look for them in other places. And so my vision as a coach is that I want to work with people that are motivated to improve and that know how to improve. And if you're motivated, if you have the time to, and if you want to put in the work, and if you want to make it, then that needs to reflect in what you do. Playing Rocket League for 10 hours a day is not going to guarantee you to improve, because you could put in a lot of these hours into other things, and learning about the game, learning how other people play, and learning different things and different playstyles, like Bromeo said, and take a lot more value from that as a player.
But from me, Greybeard, the Bromeo LDC, thanks guys for joining. It's been a fantastic stream. Peace out. Catch you on Friday for Swiss.